word speech, what is the first speech that comes to mind? Maybe you even have a favorite one. Do you know why? What do you remember about it? Hi, everyone. My name's Evelina, and I'm a data designer based in Paris. I've been working with data for around 7 years now. A few years ago, I got infected by the data visualization fever, and today I literally live and breathe data visualization every day. But I've also been passionate about public speaking for more than twice as long. And when I started designing with data, I couldn't help but notice how the lessons from all of these speeches written and given could help me design data visualizations better. So this is what I'm here to talk to you about today. If you're one of those people who are not fans of public speaking and right now you're freaking out a little bit, don't worry. This is going to be gentle and easy to follow. To understand where I'm coming from, let's go to the beginning of it all. Let's travel to the time of Aristotle. So this is Aristotle that you probably all know by name. He's considered to be the father of all things public speaking. He focused a lot on what it means to be a good orator. And the definition he gave for being a good orator was threefold. He said that the orator's job is first to define all available arguments for and against a given proposition. Second, choose the ones that will hold most sway with your audience. And finally, present them in the most convincing manner. Doesn't that sound familiar? To me, the orator's work sounds so close to that of data visualization designers. When we work with data, what we do first is look for insights and patterns in it. Once we find them, we choose the ones that will work the best with our audience, that will be the most important to them. And finally, we visualize them in the best possible manner. Now that you know that, let's dive right into the 5 concepts we're going to look at today. And concept number 1 is about building trust. At the center of Aristotle's approach to rhetoric, to public speaking, is this idea called ethos. Ethos is essentially answering the question, why should I trust you? At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned briefly how long I've been working with data for, and also what I've done with public speaking. If I had more time, I would probably go a bit more into detail. The reason I'm doing so is to try and build my audience's, your trust. I need to show that I have expertise on the matter, that I know what I'm talking about, and that I'm confident doing so. This idea of trust and trustworthiness is even more important, I believe, in data visualization. Often we look at charts and graphs as a source of facts, a source of truth, and we want to trust them. Andy Kirk defined trustworthiness as the good visualization design principle number 1 in his recent handbook on data visualization. So how can you build trust with your audience when you create data designs? 2 ways. 1, be honest. Be honest about any assumptions you make, any transformations you have to apply to your data set. I really like this example from Data Wrapper from the beginning of the year. This was at the beginning of March when the COVID pandemic first broke out. It does feel like ages ago now. But what I really like about this chart is that even though we see a metric called current confirmed cases in the middle of on the left of the bar chart, the designers tell us in the subtitle of the graph that this number is probably underestimated for certain reasons. They also provide us with a source of the data and even how often this data is refreshed. When I see that, I feel like the designers are being honest with me. It makes me want to trust them. Another way to build trust is to pay attention to detail. I would go as far as to say that this chart by 538 is pretty much flawless, like most of their work. Why? All the elements are aligned. The typefaces, the colors are consistent. The labels are right where they're supposed to be. Nothing is redundant. I don't see any clutter, anything that's unnecessary in the chart. Looking at that makes me think that the designer took the extra step. They went the extra mile to refine every single detail, which makes me think that what they create matters to them, that their work matters to them. It makes me trust them more. So if you design with ethos in mind, the audience will start to trust you. And if you do it consistently over a long period of time and also pay attention to detail, it can help you build a long-standing professional reputation. Concept number 2 has to do with objectives. When you give a speech or a presentation or try to convince your partner to go on holiday to Italy rather than Iceland next year, you can have one of these 3 objectives: to teach, to move, or to delight. Let's look at a quick example of each. Sirk and Robinson taught us about creativity, the way children learn, and schools, the way we should design school curriculum in his TED Talk, or should I say, the most viewed TED Talk of all time. An example of a speech that inspires us, that moves us to action, is Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream." I'm sure this one needs no introduction. Finally, a speech that's meant to entertain, to delight the audience, is President Obama's White House Correspondents Association dinner address. You may know this one by its very famous mic drop moment. Okay, so this seems easy enough, right? Let's now look at an example of each objective in the world of data design. In this gorgeous visualization, Nadi Bramer teaches us about pesticides, more precisely about the dangerous pesticides that are sold by big corporations. An example of a visualization that moves us to action is probably one of the most famous ones of the year, and I'm sure you've seen it before. This is the simulation of a spread of a virus by the Washington Post. The designers of this chart want us to take action after seeing it. So be it social distancing, wearing a mask, or just informing ourselves more about the coronavirus. Finally, an example of a visualization that entertains is the largest vocabulary in hip hop by The Pudding. It may not always be easy to tell which objective applies to which visualization. In fact, you may even disagree with me, for example, when looking at this chart, and tell me that it's meant to teach us something new as well. And that's okay. What matters is to choose the primary objective for your work, and then choose the most appropriate content accordingly. For instance, if I want to move my audience, to inspire them to take action with my visualization, or if you want to inspire them, how will you present the problem? Will you provide them with a solution? Will there be a call to action? If yes, where are you going to place it on your page, on your canvas? So once you have the objective and have decided which elements work the best to support it, you have to arrange it somehow. This is a quote by Quintilian. Quintilian is another one of those very smart humans that lived a couple of thousand years ago and taught us a lot about the art and the science of public speaking. With this quote, he builds quite a picture. And I really like it for that, even though it's a little provocative. It shows how important it is to structure any piece of work that you create. I'm sure you're familiar with this very basic kind of structure of beginning, middle, and end, or introduction, body, and conclusion. from giving presentations or maybe writing essays in school. Have you ever thought about it though, in the context of data design? Let's look at a few examples of how masters of data design are doing so. This first example is a data journalism piece of work by Julie from the Citron, or Data Lemon for those that don't speak French. She published this set of visualizations just last week. She introduces the topic and hooks us with the title. So we see that it's just another visualization about the coronavirus pandemic, but I am hooked when I see the name of super spreaders and I start wondering, but what is she talking about? And then she sets the context with the explanatory paragraph and dives a little bit deeper into the definitions in section 1. So how the virus spreads, the 80-20 rule, and more. Then when we read, we move on to the body of the work. And these are just a few examples. I really encourage you to read, to explore the entire visualization on Julie's Instagram page. But what we see here from a few selected images is that in each step of the middle of her visualizations, of her piece, she shows us the information from a different angle. So with every step, she teaches us something new, and in the next step, she builds on it. All that to arrive at a certain conclusion, which in her case is applications and vaccine. And not only she summarizes the work in her conclusion, but she also opens up a bigger debate towards vaccine targeting. How should we approach them? Is our current way of doing so the best way? It may seem easy to separate our visualizations into introduction, body, and conclusion when there are several of them, when it's a long form kind of work. But it can totally be done in a standalone visualization. So this is an example from Ellie Torben, which is just a simple line chart. She hooks us with a title and sets the context with a subtitle and a small explanatory paragraph. And the body of the piece is the line chart in the middle, or rather the two lines that you can see. With the information she's showing us, she takes us from the past to the present to the future. And by the time we arrive all the way to the right at the end of the line chart, we're already drawing some sort of conclusions from the information we just got. Finally, the sources of the data at the end also help us wrap up, help us draw a certain conclusion from what we just saw. If you take the time to think about how you're introducing the information to the audience, how you're expanding on it in the body of your work, and how you're concluding, it can help make your visualizations easier to follow and easier to understand for your audience. We have two other concepts left that are a little bit more abstract. Think of the last time you were speaking to someone who talks really, really fast. You know, the kind of person who spits out about 200 words a minute, and at some point you start wondering if they're still breathing. How does that sound? Overwhelming, I guess. Now compare it to, for example, the way President Obama speaks. What's the difference between the two? Pause. When you pause, it gives your audience the chance to breathe, to digest what has just been said. If you do it for a little longer than just a couple of seconds, you can emphasize what has just happened or what is about to happen to show your audience that this is really important. So what is pause in data visualization? White space, of course. We use white space to separate the different sections from each other, to help the reader navigate easily between them without feeling overwhelmed. So that's the basic way of using white space. As we have just seen, you can also use white space to make a statement. like in this magazine cover that you see on the screen, or in this example by the Superdot Studio. The fact that there's so much white space around the little chart at the middle left corner of the chart, it immediately draws my attention to it. And I start thinking, okay, so the designer wants me to look at this first. Maybe this is the most important piece of the infographic in general. At the very basic level, you should leave some white space so that your audience can breathe, so that they don't feel overwhelmed with the information you're providing them. If you're willing to go a step further into a little bit of an uncomfortable zone of white space, it can make your visualizations impactful, or even more impactful. For the final concept, let's imagine once again. Let's say your best friend just had a job interview and they're telling you the story of how it went. So the story lasts for, let's say, 3 to 5 minutes, and your friend screams the entire time. How does that sound? Not that great, right? Most importantly, it sounds unrealistic. What is much more likely is that your friend would speak at a constant pace and at a constant voice most of the time. And then sometimes they would raise their voice to show that they're really excited about something, or would whisper about something very serious or something perhaps even sad. These would be the bold moments, the pop-out moments of the story, of the talk. And the same goes for data visualization as well. You don't need to be screaming at your audience for them to pay attention. What you want to do is have only a few of those moments where you raise your voice, where you get really excited about something, or where you whisper to communicate a certain piece of information. Let's look at a few examples. I really love this map by Reuters Graphic. I think it's brilliant in its simplicity. Even though the topic is quite serious here, we don't see bold features or pop-out features just jumping at us all over the place. What the designers did here is draw our attention to a few areas where the most nuclear explosions happened, with color and size. So color for both the circles that they used on the map and also with their labels, and the size for the circles as well. Another example, also by Reuters Graphic, is this piece on plastic pollution that you may have already seen, as it's quite famous. This huge blue pile of plastic in the middle of the map is literally the only thing I see right away. I cannot stop staring at, and everything else fades in the background. Finally, a little bit more of a simpler example by Nicholas Rapp, where you just see a line chart and 2 of them pop out. 2 of them are highlighted and the rest is there for context. In most of your work, a few pop-out features will be enough. You don't need to scream at your audience the entire time. Rather, try to draw their attention to certain aspects of your work. At the beginning of my talk, I asked you if you had a favorite speech, or if you could think of one that is the most famous in your world. One of my favorites is Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream." This speech is almost twice as old as I am. Yet I know pieces of it by heart, and I come back to it regularly. Why? Martin Luther King Jr. used all of the techniques that we spoke about today, and even more, to make his speech relatable, understandable, and memorable. This kind of impact not only applies to data visualization, to public speaking, spoiler, but to data visualization as well. We, as a data visualization community, we regularly come back to Florence Nightingale's work, even though it's been decades that she created these. You and I may not create data visualizations that will be remembered 100 years from now by millions of people. And that's okay. you can still have an impact with your work. Maybe you will change the mind of your neighbor by showing them something new about a social issue in your country. Or you may change the course of a business by revealing a new piece of information about it. The context doesn't matter. What matters is that in each case, you're communicating information. But data visualization is not the only field that does that. Public speaking is one too. That's why data visualization designers can learn so much from speakers, from orators, and that's what the two fields have in common. Next time you design with data, keep that in mind. Play around with the concepts from public speaking, and it may make your work even better. Thank you.